Consciousness returned to Alex not as an awakening, but as a slow, painful thaw. The first sensation was the cold abiding, aggressive chill that seemed to radiate from the very floor beneath him. It smelled of damp concrete, stale air, and the metallic tang of dried blood. He tried to shift his weight, but his muscles screamed in protest. His arms were wrenched behind his back, wrists bound tight with heavy-duty industrial zip ties. He was lying on a hard, unforgiving surface. He opened his eyes, but the darkness was absolute, a heavy velvet shroud that pressed against his retinas. Panic, cold and sharp, began to rise in his chest, but his rational mind, the mind of an architect trained to understand structures and spaces, forced it down. He listened. The room was vast. The acoustics suggested a high ceiling and hard walls. To his left, the ragged, terrified breathing of a woman, Mia. To his right, the angry, restless shifting of a man, Lucas. A sudden, blinding flare of light shattered the darkness. A massive industrial floodlight, mounted at least 20 feet above, snapped on with an electric buzz. It illuminated a nightmare of brutalist design. They were in a windowless chamber of gray, weeping concrete. The floor was not smooth. It was scattered with millions of shards of crushed glass that glittered maliciously under the harsh light. In the center of the room stood the focal point of their prison, a hermetically sealed glass cube filled with water. Suspended inside, mocking them, was a brass key attached to a small float. The cube sat upon a heavy industrial scale with a digital readout glowing red. 0.00 kilograms. The silence was broken by a distorted, synthesized voice echoing from hidden speakers. It carried no inflection, no humanity, only the cold precision of a machine. Welcome to the basement of your sins. You are accustomed to the warmth of civilization, to the safety of your dorms and the arrogance of your youth. But here, deep in the Canadian mountains, nature does not forgive weakness. I am your host, and I forgive nothing. Lucas surged to his feet, ignoring the glass that sliced into his jeans and knees. He screamed curses at the ceiling, his varsity jacket straining as he fought the bindings. His aggression was primal, a caged animal thrashing against the bars. Mia, conversely, had curled into a ball, her eyes wide and fixated on the glass shards, her breathing shallow and rapid. She looked fragile, her evening dress offering zero protection against the subterranean freeze. The temperature is currently 4 degrees Celsius. The voice continued, indifferent to Lucas's rage. It will drop by 1 degree every 10 minutes. Hypothermia is a slow sleep, a mercy I am willing to grant. But for those who wish to leave, the rules are simple. A metallic clang rang out as an object fell from a chute in the ceiling, landing in the center of the room among the glass shards. It was a hunting knife with a serrated edge. The ties on your wrists are plastic. The knife is steel. But the door. The heavy steel blast door at the far end of the room remained shut. The key is in the cube. The cube will only open when the scale registers a weight of exactly 80.00 kilograms. Not a gram more, not a gram less. You have 1 hour before the cold becomes irreversible. The speakers clicked off. The silence that followed was heavier than the darkness had been. Alex analyzed the situation instantly. The architecture of the trap was precise. 80 kilograms. It was the weight of an average adult male. But looking at his friends, the math didn't add up. Lucas was a linebacker, easily 90 kilograms of muscle and bone. Alex himself was a lean 75. Mia was petite, barely 50. No single person could stand on that scale to activate the mechanism. The knife lay on the floor, a gleaming invitation to violence. Lucas, realizing the implication, scrambled toward the weapon. He moved with a desperate urgency, cutting his knees on the glass, grunting with pain. He maneuvered his back to the knife, his fingers fumbling blindly until he gripped the handle. With a series of jagged, frantic motions, he sawed through the plastic binding his wrists. The snap of the tie was loud in the quiet room. He freed Alex and Mia next, his hands shaking not just from the cold, but from adrenaline. We stand on it, Lucas panted, rubbing his wrists. We figure it out. They approached the scale. The air was already colder. Alex could see his breath pluming in thick white clouds. They began a desperate game of trial and error. Mia stepped on the platform first. 52.40 kilograms. Alex joined her. 127.40 kilograms. Too heavy. They tried balancing, leaning on the edges to distribute weight, but the sensors were sophisticated. They required a dead weight, centered and stable. The readout flickered wildly, mocking their instability. Time bled away. The cold began to gnaw at their extremities. Alex's fingers felt like frozen sausages, clumsy and unresponsive. The psychological pressure of the voice was working. They weren't just fighting the cold. They were fighting the growing suspicion that the solution required a sacrifice. Lucas stared at the knife in his hand, then at the scale. His eyes were wide, the pupils dilated with fear. "It wants flesh," he muttered, his voice cracking. 80 kilos. That's me. Without a leg. The horrific logic hung in the air. Mia stepped back, her eyes locking onto the knife. For a second, Alex saw something in her expression that didn't fit a cold calculation that mirrored the room itself, but it vanished instantly, replaced by terror. "No," Alex said, his voice firm despite the chattering of his teeth. "Think, Lucas. Look at the room. Why is there a bucket in the corner?" He pointed to the shadows where a rusty drum labeled water stood next to a stack of empty pails. The voice had distracted them with the threat of death and a weapon, blinding them to the utility items. "Fluid dynamics," Alex murmured, his mind racing. "We can't be the weight because we are alive. We breathe, our hearts beat, we shift. The scale needs static mass." They scrambled to the drum. The water inside was near freezing, painful to touch. They began filling the pails, dragging them to the scale. But it was a clumsy process. The weight of the buckets plus the water was unpredictable. They stacked them, watching the numbers climb. 74.00, 78.50, 81.20. "It's not precise enough," Lucas yelled, kicking a bucket. Water sloshed out, soaking his shoes, accelerating the freeze. "We need fine-tuning," Alex realized. The clothes. The water is the bulk. The clothes are the variables. The command was unspoken but understood. To survive, they had to strip. It was the ultimate humiliation. Stripping down to their underwear in a freezing concrete tomb, they threw their jeans, jackets, and shoes onto the pile of buckets sitting on the scale. 79.80 kilograms. "We need 200 grams, Alex hissed. He looked around. There was nothing left. The room was empty concrete. "The knife," Mia whispered. Lucas looked at the weapon in his hand. He placed it gently on top of the pile of wet clothes. 79.95 kilograms. 50 grams. Alex groaned. "A watch, a ring. I don't have anything," Lucas shouted. Alex looked at the water in the buckets. "Spit," he commanded. "Sweat. Anything fluid." It was a grotesque scene. 3 shivering, half-naked students spitting onto a pile of wet clothes and buckets in a freezing dungeon. But, as the fluid added its minuscule weight, the red numbers flickered. 79.99. 80.00. A pneumatic hiss echoed through the chamber. The glass cube lifted smoothly. The key, now accessible, dangled before them. Alex snatched the cold metal, his hand trembling violently. He sprinted to the blast door, ignoring the glass slicing his bare feet, and jammed the key into the lock. It turned with a heavy clunk. The door groaned open, revealing a dark corridor that, while still cold, was free of the biting wind of the cell. They tumbled into the hallway, dragging their sodden clothes with them, collapsing on the floor in a heap of shivering limbs. They were alive. As the heavy steel door slammed shut behind them, sealing the freezing room, a row of red LEDs illuminated a message painted on the opposite wall. It was fresh, dripping like blood. The corridor offered no comfort, only a reprieve from immediate death. The air here was stagnant, smelling of old copper and dust, a sharp contrast to the antiseptic freeze of the cell they had just escaped. The adrenaline that had propelled them through the final seconds of the first trial began to curdle into a sickening dread. Alex, Mia, and Lucas stood in the dim, flickering light of the hallway, shivering violently. Their clothes, soaked from the melting ice and the water buckets, clung to their bodies like second skins made of lead. Pulling the wet denim and cotton back onto their freezing limbs was a torture in itself, a friction that felt like sandpaper against numb, blue-tinged flesh. Every zipper that snagged and every button that refused to fasten was a reminder of their helplessness. They moved forward because staying still meant succumbing to the creeping cold that radiated from the concrete floor. The hallway stretched out, a claustrophobic tunnel of gray cinder blocks that seemed to narrow the further they walked. There were no windows, no vents, only the occasional buzz of a dying fluorescent tube overhead. The architecture was utilitarian and cruel, designed not for habitation but for containment. Alex noted the absence of 90-degree angles in the corners. Everything was slightly curved, a subtle design choice often used in asylums to prevent self-harm and disorientation. The irony was not lost on him. After 50 meters, the corridor terminated abruptly in a small, circular antechamber. There were 2 doors here. To the left, a heavy iron door welded shut, rusted and immovable. To the right, a sleek, modern door made of reinforced polycarbonate, glowing with a soft, inviting amber light. Between them stood a pedestal made of stainless steel, surgical in its cleanliness. On the pedestal lay a single object, a heavy-duty, industrial cigar cutter. Its blade was open, gleaming under a focused spotlight. Next to it was a small recessed tray, similar to the coin return on a vending machine, but lined with a sterile, white absorbent pad. Above the pedestal, a small monitor flickered to life. No voice spoke this time. Instead, text scrolled across the screen in jagged, green pixels. The path forward requires sacrifice. The door opens only for those willing to leave a piece of themselves behind. 1 digit, 1 passage. The brutal simplicity of the instruction hung in the air. There was no riddle to solve, no physics equation to balance. This was a transaction. Mia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She backed away until her spine hit the cold wall, her eyes wide and fixed on the steel cutter. The implication was horrific. The mechanism was not asking for blood. It was asking for a permanent, irreversible loss. It demanded a violation of the body's integrity. Alex stepped closer to the pedestal, his mind frantically searching for a loophole. He examined the tray. It likely contained a weight sensor or a biometric scanner tuned to organic material. He looked for wires to strip, a panel to pry open, but the pedestal was a seamless monolith of steel bolted into the concrete. It was tamper-proof. The host had anticipated the engineer's mind. The silence in the room was broken only by the dripping of water from their soaked clothes. They stood in a triangle of hesitation. Alex looked at his own hands, the hands of an architect, essential for drawing, for building, for creating. The thought of losing a finger sent a wave of nausea through him. He looked at Mia. She was a pianist. Her hands were her life, her expression one of paralyzed terror. Then there was Lucas. The athlete was pacing, his wet shoes squeaking on the floor. His chest heaved with a mixture of rage and the lingering effects of the cold. He stared at the cutter with a dark, brooding intensity. In the first room, his bulk had been a liability. His weight had nearly killed them. The shame of that failure, combined with his impulsive, aggressive nature, was creating a volatile chemical reaction in his mind. Alex opened his mouth to suggest they search for another tool, perhaps a piece of debris from the corridor to trick the sensor, but deep down, he knew it was futile. The machine wanted flesh. "We can't do this," Mia whispered, her voice barely audible. "We can't just ... we have to," Lucas said. His voice was flat, devoid of the panic that had gripped him earlier. "Lucas, wait," Alex interjected, raising a hand. "Let me look at the wiring again. Maybe if we short-circuit the ... there is no wiring." "Alex," Lucas snapped, turning on him. His eyes were wild, bloodshot. "Don't you get it? He's watching us. He wants to see who breaks." We stood around in the freezer until we almost died because we were too scared to act. "Not again." Lucas stepped up to the pedestal. The decision had been made in the dark recesses of his mind, driven by a complex cocktail of guilt and a desire to regain control. He was the protector, the strong one. If physical pain was the currency, he was the only one rich enough to pay. He didn't give Alex a chance to stop him. He didn't give me a chance to scream. Lucas slammed his left hand onto the steel surface. He grabbed the heavy cutter with his right hand. He didn't hesitate. Hesitation would mean stopping. He jammed his left little finger into the guillotine hole of the device. Alex lunged forward, shouting, "Lucas, no!" The sound was sickening, a wet, distinct crunch that seemed to echo louder than any scream. Lucas let out a guttural roar, a sound of pure, animalistic shock. He dropped the cutter and staggered back, clutching his left hand against his chest. Blood sprayed instantly, bright and arterial, painting the pristine steel pedestal and splattering across the floor. On the white absorbent pad in the tray lay the severed tip of a finger. For a second, the world seemed to pause. Mia squeezed her eyes shut, turning her head away, her body trembling uncontrollably. Alex stood frozen, staring at the blood pooling on the floor, the stark reality of the violence overriding his rational mind. A cheerful chime, like an elevator arriving at a lobby, sounded from the pedestal. The amber light on the polycarbonate door turned green. The lock disengaged with a smooth, hydraulic hiss. Lucas was on his knees now, hyperventilating. His face was gray, drained of color, his teeth gritted so hard Alex thought they might crack. He was rocking back and forth, cradling his maimed hand. Alex snapped out of his trance. He ripped a strip of fabric from his already torn shirt and knelt beside his friend. "Pressure," he muttered, his voice shaking. "We need pressure." He wrapped the makeshift bandage around the stump of Lucas's finger, pulling it tight. Lucas screamed through his teeth, a high-pitched sound of agony, but he didn't pull away. "You idiot," Alex whispered, tying the knot. "You absolute idiot." Lucas looked up, his eyes glassy and unfocused, sweat mingling with the water on his forehead. Didn't it?" he rasped, forcing a grim, bloody smile. "I got us out." Mia finally moved. She approached them slowly, avoiding the blood on the floor. She looked down at Lucas, her expression unreadable, a mix of horror and something colder, something analytical that vanished as soon as Alex looked up at her. "We have to move," Mia said, her voice trembling but insistent. "He's losing blood. We need to find a first aid kit." "The next room. Maybe there's something there." Alex helped Lucas to his feet. The athlete was heavy, dead weight leaning against him. The adrenaline was fading, and shock was setting in. They moved toward the open door. As they crossed the threshold, leaving the bloody pedestal behind, the monitor above it flashed one final message: "Payment accepted. Remember, the body heals, but the mind does not. Welcome to the archive." The hydraulic hiss of the door ceiling behind them acted as a boundary line. They had left the slaughterhouse aesthetic of the previous chambers and stepped into something far more unsettling, the uncanny valley of memory. The room was not a dungeon. It was warm, lit by the soft, amber glow of floor lamps and string lights draped haphazardly across the ceiling. The smell hit Alex first, a specific, nostalgic cocktail of stale beer, cheap aerosol deodorant, and old textbook paper. It was the scent of their university life. As his eyes adjusted, the architecture of the trap revealed itself. It was a replica, a meticulous, terrifyingly accurate reconstruction of the common room in their shared off-campus house in Vancouver. The worn velvet sofa, with the cigarette burn on the armrest, sat in the center. The poster of Metropolis that Alex had framed in his first year hung slightly crooked above the TV. Even the coffee table was cluttered with empty soda cans and pizza boxes, frozen in a tableau of a lazy Tuesday night. "What is this?" Mia whispered, her voice trembling. She walked further into the room, her bare feet sinking into a rug that looked exactly like the one she had bought at a flea market 2 years ago. "Why are we here?" Lucas didn't answer. He collapsed onto the replica sofa, clutching his maimed hand against his chest. His face was a mask of gray sweat, the shock of the amputation beginning to give way to a throbbing, fiery pain. The blood from his makeshift bandage seeped through the fabric, dripping onto the familiar rug. A grotesque violation of the domestic scene. Alex rushed to the kitchenette, a perfect copy of their own, down to the magnets on the fridge. He ripped open the cabinets. They were empty of food, but in the drawer where they usually kept junk mail, he found a pristine, white first aid kit. "Found it," Alex called out. He hurried back to Lucas, kneeling beside the sofa. "Let me see." Lucas groaned, pulling his hand away initially, but then surrendering. Alex worked quickly, his hands shaking slightly as he unwrapped the blood-soaked shirt. The wound was clean but brutal. He applied antiseptic from the kit Lucas, hissed through clenched teeth and wrapped it tightly with professional-grade gauze. Painkillers, Lucas rasped, his eyes squeezed shut. There's a bottle here, Alex said, checking the label. It's sealed. Acetaminophen. He popped the pills into Lucas's mouth and tilted a bottle of water he found on the table. As Lucas's breathing stabilized, the silence of the room began to press in. It wasn't the empty silence of the concrete box. It was a loaded silence, filled with the ghosts of their friendship. Alex stood up and looked around. The attention to detail was obsessive. It implied surveillance, long-term, intimate observation. The host hadn't just kidnapped them. He had studied them. He knew where they sat, what they drank, how they lived. Look at the TV, Mia said. She was standing by the entertainment unit, her arms wrapped around herself defensively. The television screen, a black void in the warm room, flickered to life. But instead of static or the host's voice, it displayed a static menu with 3 file names: Alex, Lucas, Mia. Beneath the TV, on the shelf where the gaming console should have been, sat 3 physical dossiers. They were thick, bound in black leather. Don't touch them, Lucas warned from the couch, his voice groggy. It's another trap. We don't have a choice, Alex said, his architect's eye scanning the room for an exit. There was a door on the far wall, painted to look like the door to the bedrooms, but it lacked a handle. Above it, a digital counter displayed a percentage. 0% truth. We have to read them, Alex concluded grimly. The door opens when the percentage hits 100. He wants us to confess. He stepped forward and picked up the folder labeled Lucas. Alex. Don't, Lucas growled, trying to sit up, but the pain pinned him down. Alex opened the file. The first page wasn't a confession. It was a police report, a suppressed police report from 2 years ago. The photos attached were brutal: a freshman student with a shattered jaw and a fractured orbital socket. Aggravated assault. Alex read aloud, the words tasting like ash. Charges dropped due to lack of evidence and a substantial out-of-court settlement paid by the Sterling Family Trust. He looked up at Lucas. You told us that guy fell down the stairs at the frat house. You said you helped him. Lucas looked away, staring at the ceiling. He was talking trash. He wouldn't shut up. I didn't mean to break his face, Alex. My dad handled it. It's done. You nearly killed him, Lucas, Mia said softly, her eyes wide. And you let us defend you to the dean. The counter above the door clicked. 33% truth. Alex felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He reached for the second folder, the one labeled Alex. His hands felt heavy. He knew what was inside before he opened it. It was a set of blueprints. The blueprints, the design for the Sustainable Community Center that had won him the prestigious Young Architect of the Year award last semester. Clipped to the front was a series of emails between Alex and a quiet, brilliant student named Sarah, who had dropped out due to stress months before the competition. The emails showed the truth. Sarah had sent Alex her drafts for feedback. Alex had ghosted her, tweaked the geometry, and submitted the work as his own plagiarism. Mia asked, leaning over his shoulder to read the printed correspondence. Alex, you built your internship on this. It wasn't stealing, Alex defended weakly, though the shame burned his cheeks. She had the concept, but she couldn't execute. I made it buildable. I made it real. She gave up. You stole her future, Lucas muttered from the couch, a dark satisfaction in his voice. Mr. Perfect isn't so perfect. The counter clicked again. 66% truth. Only one folder remained. Mia. Alex hesitated. Mia was the glue of their group. The psychology major, the listener, the one who smoothed over Lucas's aggression and Alex's ego. What could she possibly have done? Mia reached out and took the folder herself. Her hands were trembling, but her movements were precise. She opened it. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. They were photos of Alex and Lucas, taken from a distance. Alex sleeping in the library. Lucas training at the track. The photos were dated 3 years ago, months before they had officially met and become friends. Beneath the photos was a medical evaluation from a clinical psychiatrist. The diagnosis was highlighted in yellow: obsessive tendencies, attachment disorder, recommended for immediate intervention. "You were stalking us?" Alex asked, stepping back from her. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Their chance meeting in the cafeteria, the way she inserted herself into their lives. It had all been engineered. "I was lonely," Mia said, tears welling in her eyes, her voice cracking perfectly. "I just wanted to be part of something. I saw you too. You seemed so alive. I just wanted to be near that energy. I didn't mean any harm." She looked small, pathetic, clutching the damning evidence to her chest. The counter clicked. 100% truth. The handle-less door on the far wall buzzed and popped open a few inches. The way forward was clear, but the atmosphere in the room had shattered. The warmth of the lighting now felt sickly and artificial. They weren't 3 friends anymore. They were 3 strangers bound by lies, trapped in a box that knew them better than they knew each other. Lucas struggled to his feet, cradling his hand. He looked at Alex with disgust, then at Mia with fear. Alex couldn't meet either of their gazes. The trust, which had been their only currency against the host, was bankrupt. "Let's go," Alex said, his voice hollow. "This room is done with us." As they moved toward the exit, the lights in the replica dorm room abruptly died, plunging them into total darkness. From the pitch black, the sound of mechanical gears grinding began to echo, followed by the sensation of the floor beneath them tilting. The archive was closed. The next lesson was about to begin, and this time they would be facing it alone in the dark. The floor beneath them didn't just tilt, it vanished. With the grinding sound of heavy machinery, the false floor of the dorm room dropped away, transforming into a polished steel chute. Gravity took hold before they could scream. Alex, Lucas, and Mia slid downward into the abyss, their bodies tumbling uncontrollably through a spiral of cold metal. The warmth of the dorm room was replaced instantly by a damp, subterranean chill. They landed hard on a surface that yielded slightly rubber matting, thick and industrial. The impact knocked the wind out of Alex. He lay gasping in the absolute, crushing blackness. There was no ambient light here, no LEDs, no cracks under a door, no emergency glow. It was a sensory deprivation tank the size of a warehouse. "Lucas." Mia, Alex called out. His voice sounded flat, swallowed by the acoustics of the space. The walls were likely padded or lined with sound-absorbing foam. "I'm here." Mia's voice drifted from somewhere to his left. She sounded small, terrified. "My hand." Lucas groaned from the right. The pain in his voice was jagged. "I landed on my hand." "God damn it. Stay where you are," Alex commanded, trying to reassert leadership despite the shame burning in his gut from the plagiarism revelation. "We need to figure out the dimensions of this room. If we move blindly, we could walk into another trap." He reached out, his fingers brushing against the floor. It was textured rubber, like a gym floor. He stood up slowly, extending his arms. Nothing but air. He took a step. Then another. The darkness was heavy, pressing against his eyes, creating phantom flashes of color, phosphenes dancing in the void. Deprived of sight, his other senses sharpened. He could hear the drip of water far away, the hum of a ventilation system, and the ragged, wet breathing of Lucas. But then he heard something else. It was a soft swish of fabric. Not the heavy denim of Lucas's jeans, nor the light rustle of Mia's dress. It was the distinct sound of synthetic tactical gear rubbing against itself. "Lucas, stop moving," Alex hissed. "I'm not moving." Lucas snapped back, his voice tight with pain. "I'm holding my damn hand." "Mia, I'm sitting down." "Alex, I'm too scared to move." Alex froze. The sound had come from directly ahead of him. Someone else was in the room. The rational part of his brain, the architect, who believed in blueprints and logic, tried to dismiss it. It was an echo, a rat, a machine, but the survival instinct, ancient and screaming, told him otherwise. There was a presence in the dark, a fourth vector in a 3-person equation. He crouched low, making himself a smaller target. He held his breath, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Whoosh! The air displaced near his ear. A fist materialized from the void, connecting solidly with Alex's jaw. The blow was precise, calculated, and silent. Alex staggered back, seeing stars that weren't there. He didn't fall. He swung his arm out blindly, a defensive haymaker into the dark. His knuckles connected with something hard, a chest protected by a vest or plating. "Who are you?" Alex shouted, the sound tearing from his throat. There was no verbal response, only the sound of movement, fast, efficient, and heavy. This wasn't the clumsy stumbling of a terrified student. This was a predator. A hand grabbed Alex by the throat. It was a gloved hand, leather gripping skin. The grip was iron. Alex was lifted off his feet and slammed backward. His spine collided with a wall he hadn't known was there. The air left his lungs. He kicked out, his foot connecting with a shin. The attacker didn't grunt, didn't curse, they just tightened the grip. Alex clawed at the arm holding him, feeling the texture of a tactical sleeve. This wasn't Lucas. Lucas was strong, but he was currently crippled by pain and blood loss, lying 10 meters away. This wasn't Mia. Mia weighed 50 kilos soaking wet. This attacker was a heavyweight. "Alex," Mia screamed, hearing the scuffle. "Alex, what's happening?" The distraction worked. The grip on his throat loosened for a fraction of a second. Alex dropped his chin, tucked his shoulder, and rammed his body weight forward, a move he remembered from high school wrestling. He broke free, gasping for air, and scrambled sideways across the rubber floor. "Get back." Alex yelled into the darkness. "There's someone else in here." "Stay together." Silence returned. The attacker had vanished into the void as quickly as they had appeared. Alex swept his hands across the floor, desperate for a weapon. His fingers brushed against something cold and cylindrical. A flashlight. No, a flare. A road flare. He grabbed it, fumbled with the cap, and struck it. With a hiss and a blinding burst of red chemical fire, the room was illuminated. They were in a maze. The walls were high partitions made of black soundproofing foam, creating a labyrinth of dead ends and narrow corridors. The red light cast long, dancing shadows that looked like demons on the walls. Alex spun around, the flare held high like a torch. He was alone in his section of the maze. "Lucas, Mia, over here." Lucas shouted. Alex sprinted around a corner, the red light bleeding into the darkness. He found Lucas sitting against a wall, clutching his bleeding hand, looking pale and ghostly in the crimson glow. Mia was huddled next to him, her eyes wide with terror. "Did you see him?" Alex demanded, scanning the tops of the partitions. "Did you see who hit me?" "Hit you?" Lucas looked up, confused. "We didn't hear anything until you started yelling. We thought you lost your mind." "I was choked," Alex insisted, touching his neck. The skin was already tender. "Someone threw me against the wall." "A man? Strong? Tactical gear?" Mia stood up slowly, her face bathed in red light. She looked at Alex's neck. "Alex, there are marks. Fingerprints." Alex looked at Lucas. Lucas was in no condition to fight. He looked at Mia. She was shaking. "The host isn't just a voice," Alex whispered, the realization chilling him more than the ice room ever had. "He's in here with us. Or he has an enforcer." He looked up at the ceiling of the warehouse. It was lost in shadow, beyond the reach of the flare. "We aren't playing a game anymore," Alex said, his voice grim. "We're being hunted," as the flare began to sputter, threatening to plunge them back into the dark. A heavy metallic clank echoed through the maze. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a lit staircase leading upward. "Run." The word was projected onto the floor in white light. Alex grabbed Lucas's good arm. "Move, now." They ran toward the light, leaving the darkness behind. But Alex couldn't shake the sensation of the gloved hand on his throat. It felt personal, and worse, it felt familiar. The height, the build, he had felt that specific kind of strength before. As they ascended the stairs, Alex glanced back one last time. For a fleeting second, just before the flare died, he thought, he saw a silhouette standing atop one of the maze walls, watching them. It wasn't moving, it was just observing, and it was holding the knife they had left in the first room. The floor beneath them didn't just tilt, it vanished. With the grinding sound of heavy machinery, the false floor of the dorm room dropped away, transforming into a polished steel chute. Gravity took hold before they could scream. Alex, Lucas, and Mia slid downward into the abyss, their bodies tumbling uncontrollably through a spiral of cold metal. The warmth of the dorm room was replaced instantly by a damp, subterranean chill. They landed hard on a surface that yielded slightly rubber matting, thick and industrial. The impact knocked the wind out of Alex. He lay gasping in the absolute, crushing blackness. There was no ambient light here, no LEDs, no cracks under a door, no emergency glow. It was a sensory deprivation tank the size of a warehouse. Lucas. Mia, Alex called out. His voice sounded flat, swallowed by the acoustics of the space. The walls were likely padded or lined with sound-absorbing foam. I'm here. Mia's voice drifted from somewhere to his left. She sounded small, terrified. My hand. Lucas groaned from the right. The pain in his voice was jagged. I landed on my hand. God damn it. Stay where you are, Alex commanded, trying to reassert leadership despite the shame burning in his gut from the plagiarism revelation. We need to figure out the dimensions of this room. If we move blindly, we could walk into another trap. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the floor. It was textured rubber, like a gym floor. He stood up slowly, extending his arms. Nothing but air. He took a step. Then another. The darkness was heavy, pressing against his eyes, creating phantom flashes of color, phosphenes dancing in the void. Deprived of sight, his other senses sharpened. He could hear the drip of water far away, the hum of a ventilation system, and the ragged, wet breathing of Lucas. But then, he heard something else. It was a soft swish of fabric. Not the heavy denim of Lucas's jeans, nor the light rustle of Mia's dress. It was the distinct sound of synthetic tactical gear rubbing against itself. Lucas, stop moving, Alex hissed. I'm not moving. Lucas snapped back, his voice tight with pain. I'm holding my damn hand. Mia, I'm sitting down. Alex, I'm too scared to move. Alex froze. The sound had come from directly ahead of him. Someone else was in the room. The rational part of his brain, the architect, who believed in blueprints and logic, tried to dismiss it. It was an echo, a rat, a machine, but the survival instinct, ancient and screaming, told him otherwise. There was a presence in the dark, a fourth vector in a three-person equation. He crouched low, making himself a smaller target. He held his breath, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Whoosh! The air displaced near his ear. A fist materialized from the void, connecting solidly with Alex's jaw. The blow was precise, calculated, and silent. Alex staggered back, seeing stars that weren't there. He didn't fall. He swung his arm out blindly, a defensive haymaker into the dark. His knuckles connected with something hard, a chest protected by a vest or plating. Who are you? Alex shouted, the sound tearing from his throat. There was no verbal response, only the sound of movement, fast, efficient, and heavy. This wasn't the clumsy stumbling of a terrified student. This was a predator. A hand grabbed Alex by the throat. It was a gloved hand, leather gripping skin. The grip was iron. Alex was lifted off his feet and slammed backward. His spine collided with the wall he hadn't known was there. The air left his lungs. He kicked out, his foot connecting with a shin. The attacker didn't grunt, didn't curse, they just tightened the grip. Alex clawed at the arm holding him, feeling the texture of a tactical sleeve. This wasn't Lucas. Lucas was strong, but he was currently crippled by pain and blood loss, lying 10 meters away. This wasn't Mia. Mia weighed 50 kilos soaking wet. This attacker was a heavyweight. Alex, Mia screamed, hearing the scuffle. Alex, what's happening? The distraction worked. The grip on his throat loosened for a fraction of a second. Alex dropped his chin, tucked his shoulder, and rammed his body weight forward, a move he remembered from high school wrestling. He broke free, gasping for air, and scrambled sideways across the rubber floor. Get back. Alex yelled into the darkness. There's someone else in here. Stay together. Silence returned. The attacker had vanished into the void as quickly as they had appeared. Alex swept his hands across the floor, desperate for a weapon. His fingers brushed against something cold and cylindrical, a flashlight. No, a flare. A road flare. He grabbed it, fumbled with the cap, and struck it. With a hiss and a blinding burst of red chemical fire, the room was illuminated. They were in a maze. The walls were high partitions made of black soundproofing foam, creating a labyrinth of dead ends and narrow corridors. The red light cast long, dancing shadows that looked like demons on the walls. Alex spun around, the flare held high like a torch. He was alone in his section of the maze. Lucas, Mia, over here. Lucas shouted. Alex sprinted around a corner, the red light bleeding into the darkness. He found Lucas sitting against a wall, clutching his bleeding hand, looking pale and ghostly in the crimson glow. Mia was huddled next to him, her eyes wide with terror. Did you see him? Alex demanded, scanning the tops of the partitions. Did you see who hit me? Hit you? Lucas looked up, confused. We didn't hear anything until you started yelling. We thought you lost your mind. I was choked, Alex insisted, touching his neck. The skin was already tender. Someone threw me against the wall. A man, strong, tactical gear. Mia stood up slowly, her face bathed in red light. She looked at Alex's neck. Alex, there are marks, fingerprints. Alex looked at Lucas. Lucas was in no condition to fight. He looked at Mia. She was shaking. The host isn't just a voice, Alex whispered, the realization chilling him more than the ice room ever had. He's in here with us. Or he has an enforcer. He looked up at the ceiling of the warehouse. It was lost in shadow, beyond the reach of the flare. We aren't playing a game anymore, Alex said, his voice grim. We're being hunted, as the flare began to sputter, threatening to plunge them back into the dark. A heavy metallic clank echoed through the maze. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a lit staircase leading upward. Run. The word was projected onto the floor in white light. Alex grabbed Lucas's good arm. Move, now. They ran toward the light, leaving the darkness behind. But Alex couldn't shake the sensation of the gloved hand on his throat. It felt personal, and worse, it felt familiar. The height, the build, he had felt that specific kind of strength before. As they ascended the stairs, Alex glanced back one last time. For a fleeting second, just before the flare died, he thought, he saw a silhouette standing atop one of the maze walls, watching them. It wasn't moving, it was just observing, and it was holding the knife they had left in the first room. The chute deposited them not onto a floor, but onto a grate of heavy, rusted iron. Below them, visible through the mesh, was the churning gut of the machine, massive gears turning slowly in pools of oil, pistons hissing with steam, and thick cables snaking into the darkness like black intestines. The air here was hot and thick with the taste of grease and ozone. Alex helped Lucas to his feet. The athlete was dead weight now, his skin gray and clammy. The bandage on his hand was soaked through, the blood dripping steadily onto the iron grate, disappearing into the machinery below. Keep moving, Alex urged, shouting over the rhythmic thrum of the engines. We can't stay in the maintenance shafts. The heat will kill us before the traps do. He consulted the stolen blueprint. The blue lines were harder to read in the dim, amber emergency lighting, but he found their location. They were in the sub-level service corridor. To get back to the main spiral that led to the heart, they needed to cross the sector for junction. There, Alex pointed to a narrow catwalk suspended over the grinding gears. That walkway leads to the central shaft. They moved in a staggered line, Alex in front, Lucas limping in the middle, Mia bringing up the rear. The catwalk was narrow, barely wide enough for one person. It vibrated violently with every rotation of the machinery below. As they reached the midpoint of the bridge, the environment shifted. The steady hum of the machine changed pitch, rising to a screeching whine. Alex, Mia screamed. The bridge. Alex spun around. The section of the catwalk behind Lucas was retracting. The metal plates were sliding back into the walls. Run! Alex yelled, grabbing Lucas and hauling him forward. They scrambled toward the far door. But the architecture was faster. A heavy glass door, painted with black and yellow hazard stripes, began to descend from the ceiling, cutting off the path. Alex and Lucas dove under the closing slab, tumbling onto the concrete of the next corridor. They turned back just in time to see Mia sprinting toward them. Mia, slide. Lucas roared. She threw herself forward, but she was a fraction of a second too slow. The blast door slammed down with a deafening boom, sealing the corridor with the finality of a tombstone. Mia. Alex threw himself against the cold steel, hammering on it with his fists. Mia, can you hear me? Silence. The door was soundproof, airtight, and immovable. She's gone, Lucas whispered, sliding down the wall. He stared at his bandaged stump, his eyes vacant. He separated us. Wolfpack tactics. Pick off the straggler. On the other side of the door, the panic vanished from Mia's face the moment the lock engaged. She didn't pound on the door. She didn't scream for Alex. She stood up, brushed the dust from her dress, and listened. The machinery hummed, masking any sound from the other side. She was alone. Or so it seemed. Mia turned away from the door and surveyed her new prison. She was in a storage sector. Shelves lined the walls, filled with ominous supplies. Jugs of hydrochloric acid, coils of razor wire, boxes of electronic components. It was the backstage of the theater of pain. She walked with a calm, predatory grace, her earlier trembling completely absent. She wasn't looking for an exit. She was looking for a narrative. At the end of the aisle, she found it. A room was set up like a grotesque tableau. In the center sat a wooden chair. Bound to it was a figure, a man, wearing the tattered remains of a hiking outfit. His head hung low, chin on his chest. Mia approached slowly. She knew who this was supposed to be. She reached out and tilted the man's head back. The skin was leathery, desiccated. He had been dead for months. It was a previous guest, or perhaps just a cadaver stolen from a morgue to set the scene. Pinned to the corpse's chest with a rusty nail was a laminated note. I confessed, but nobody listened. Mia read the note, her expression blank. She looked around the room. There was a camera in the corner, its red light blinking slowly. She took a deep breath. She reached up and messed up her hair, pulling strands loose to frame her face in a chaotic, terrified halo. She rubbed her hands on the dusty floor and smeared grime across her cheeks and forehead, crafting the mask of a victim who had been through hell. Then, she grabbed a metal pipe lying on the floor and smashed it against a shelf, creating a loud crash. She turned to the camera, her eyes suddenly wide with manufactured terror, tears welling up on command. Alex, Lucas, she screamed, her voice cracking perfectly. Oh God, there's a body. He's dead. Help me. Please. Somebody help me. She collapsed near the corpse, curling into a ball, making sure her fear was captured from the best angle. Did you hear that? Alex froze. Faintly, vibrating through the ventilation ducts, came a scream. It was muffled and distorted, but unmistakably Mia. She's alive, Alex said, relief washing over him. She sounds close. The vents. He looked up. A ventilation grate was screwed into the ceiling above them. We have to get into the air shafts, Alex said, unfolding the blueprint. If the map is right, all the vents feed back to the central exchange. We can intercept her there. Lucas didn't move. He was staring at Alex with a look of pure venom. You led us here. Lucas spat. You and your damn map. You led her into a trap. You knew the bridge would retract, didn't you? What? Alex stepped back. Lucas, you're losing blood. You're delirious. You have the map. Lucas struggled to his feet, swaying dangerously. You know the layout. Maybe you're working with him. Maybe this is part of your project. That's insanity. Alex snapped. I'm trying to save us. Save us. Lucas laughed, a wet, hacking sound. I lost a finger. Mia is gone, and you. You haven't barely a scratch on you. Alex. Why is that? Lucas took a step forward. He wasn't looking at Alex as a friend anymore. He was looking at him as a target. The pain, the drugs, and the trauma had fractured his mind. Lucas, stop. Alex warned, raising his hands. Give me the map. Lucas demanded, extending his good hand. You can't read it. It's technical. I said give me the damn map. Lucas lunged. He was slower than usual, but he had the weight advantage. He tackled Alex, driving him into the concrete floor. The blueprint skittered across the hallway. They grappled in the dirt, the architect and the athlete. Lucas was fueled by rage, thrashing wildly, his bandaged hand striking Alex in the face, smearing fresh blood over Alex's eyes. Alex struggled to defend himself without hurting his injured friend, but Lucas was trying to choke him. It's you, Lucas screamed, saliva flying. It's always been you. Alex managed to get a knee up, driving it into Lucas's stomach. Lucas doubled over, gasping. Alex scrambled back, grabbing the blueprint. He stood up, panting, wiping the blood from his face. We are wasting time. Alex shouted, his voice echoing in the corridor. Mia is alone with a monster. I am going to the vents. You can follow me, or you can stay here and bleed to death. Make a choice. Alex turned his back on Lucas, a calculated risk, and jumped up to grab the ventilation grate. He unscrewed it with the edge of the cigar cutter key he still had in his pocket. He pulled himself up into the shaft. He paused, looking down. Lucas was on his knees, weeping softly. The rage had burned out, leaving only a hollow, terrified boy. Help me, Lucas whispered. Alex reached down, extending his hand. Come on, Alex said softly. I won't leave you behind. Lucas took his hand. Alex heaved him up into the darkness of the shaft. They crawled forward toward the sound of Mia's screams, unaware that they were crawling toward a performance, not a tragedy. The ventilation shaft was a narrow throat of galvanized steel, suffocatingly tight and radiating heat. It smelled of burnt dust and the metallic tang of Lucas's infection, which had begun to fill the confined space with a sickly sweet odor. Alex crawled in front, the blueprint clenched in his teeth, his knees bruised and scraping against the rivets. Behind him, Lucas was a heavy, erratic presence. He was muttering to himself, a stream of consciousness that swung violently between apologies and threats. I didn't mean to. Dad paid him off. Alex knows. Alex thinks he's better. Save your breath, Lucas, Alex whispered, his voice echoing in the tin tunnel. We're almost at the junction. Are we? Lucas's voice was too loud, distorted by the acoustics. Or are you leading me to another butcher shop? Maybe you want my other hand, Alex, for symmetry. Alex stopped crawling. He turned his head as much as the space allowed. In the gloom, illuminated only by the faint light filtering through the seams of the metal, Lucas's eyes were to wet, feverish voids. The pain and the blood loss had stripped away the veneer of the confident varsity athlete, leaving behind a terrified, dangerous animal. I am trying to get us to Mia, Alex said, enunciating every word carefully. Mia is dead. Lucas slammed his good fist against the metal wall. I heard her scream. You killed her when you triggered that door. She is alive. I heard her too. Keep moving. Alex pushed forward, desperate to put distance between himself and the man who was supposed to be his best friend. 10 meters later, the shaft abruptly ended at a grate. Alex peered through. Below them lay a cavernous cylindrical chamber, the sector for junction he had seen on the map. It was the mechanical heart of the house. Massive pistons, the size of tree trunks, pumped rhythmically, driving the rotation of the rooms above. Enormous gears, slick with black oil, meshed together with earth-shaking groans. Suspended across this industrial hellscape was a single, narrow beam, an I-beam painted with hazard stripes, leading to a control booth on the far side. We have to drop, Alex said. He kicked the grate out. It fell, clattering against the machinery below, before vanishing into the dark, oily depths. Alex lowered himself and dropped onto a maintenance platform. He reached up for Lucas. Lucas fell heavily, his legs buckling. Alex caught him, preventing him from tumbling over the edge. "Get off me." Lucas shoved Alex away, staggering back toward the railing. He panted heavily, clutching his bandaged hand to his chest. Suddenly, the grinding noise of the machinery dampened, replaced by the crackle of the speakers. "Welcome to the grind. The machine requires friction to function. But here, the friction is human." A spotlight snapped on, illuminating the I-beam bridge. It was unstable, swaying slightly with the vibration of the pistons. The bridge is calibrated for a single passage. The structural integrity will fail under the weight of 2. One must remain to operate the gears. 1 may proceed to the final stage. Alex looked at the control panel near them. It had a heavy lever. It was obvious someone had to hold the lever down to stabilize the beam so the other could cross. The person holding the lever would be left behind. "I'll stay," Alex said immediately. He moved toward the panel. "I can figure out another way around once you're across." "Lucas, you go. Find Mia." He expected relief. He expected gratitude. Instead, Lucas laughed. It was a dry, broken sound. "You think I'm stupid, don't you?" Lucas stepped between Alex and the lever. "You think I'm that's the dumb jock who creates friction. You stay." "Bullshit. You send me out there. The bridge drops, and I fall into the gears. That's the plan, right? Just like you planned to steal Sarah's work. Just like you planned this whole weekend." "Lucas, look at me," Alex pleaded, raising his hands. "I am not the enemy. The man on the speakers is the enemy. If we fight, he wins. He told me. Double quotes," Lucas whispered, tilting his head as if listening to a frequency Alex couldn't hear. "He told me you were the one who suggested the mountain trip. He told me you picked the house. That's a lie. We voted on it. He says only the strongest survives." Lucas pulled the hunting knife from his belt. He had kept it. Alex hadn't realized he still had it. The blade was rusted now, stained with dried blood. "Lucas, put the knife down. I'm not dying here." "Alex, I'm not dying in a basement while you walk away with the prize." Lucas lunged. It wasn't a calculated strike. It was a desperate, flailing slash. Alex leapt back, but the tip of the blade sliced through his shirt, drawing a thin line of blood across his chest. "Lucas, stop." Lucas didn't stop. He roared, swinging the knife again, driving Alex backward toward the edge of the platform. Behind Alex, the massive gears churned, a meat grinder waiting for flesh. Alex looked around for a weapon, a tool, anything. He saw a loose length of pipe, but he couldn't reach it without exposing his neck. "You were always jealous," Lucas screamed, tears streaming down his grime-streaked face. "You and your awards. You and your perfect future. Look at you now. You're just meat like the rest of us." Lucas charged. He dropped his shoulder, aiming to tackle Alex off the ledge. Alex's training took over not martial arts, but physics, force, momentum, fulcrum. He didn't try to block Lucas. He couldn't overpower a man who outweighed him by 20 kilos, even an injured one. Instead, Alex dropped to the ground, sliding flat against the oil-slicked metal. Lucas, expecting resistance, hit nothing but air. His momentum carried him forward. He stumbled over Alex's prone body. He hit the railing. The railing on this platform was old, rusted. It wasn't designed to hold the weight of a linebacker crashing into it at full speed. With the screech of tearing metal, the bolts sheared off. "Alex!" Lucas screamed, his arms flailing as the barrier gave way. He went over. Alex scrambled to his feet and lunged forward, grabbing Lucas's right hand, the hand holding the knife. "I got you," Alex yelled, his muscles straining as he held Lucas's entire weight over the abyss. Lucas dangled above the grinding gears. The knife slipped from his fingers and fell, disappearing instantly into the crushing teeth of the machine. For a moment, they locked eyes. The rage in Lucas's face evaporated, replaced by a clarity that only imminent death brings. He looked at Alex, then down at the gears, then back at Alex. "He won't let us both go," Lucas whispered. "Pull." Alex gritted his teeth, trying to haul him up. "Use your other hand." Lucas tried to reach up with his left hand, but the bandage stump banged against the metal edge. He screamed in agony, his grip on Alex slipping. The sweat and oil made his skin slick. I can single quotes T. Double quotes Lucas sobbed. Alex, it hurts. Don't let go. Alex double quotes Lucas's eyes focused on something behind Alex. A realization. A regret. Don't trust her. What? Mia? Lucas gasped. I saw her. In the photos. She was smiling. Before Alex could process the words, the vibration of the platform shook them violently. Alex's hand slipped. No. Lucas didn't scream as he fell. He just looked at Alex with a profound sadness. He hit the gears. The sound was hideous, a wet thud, followed by the sickening crunch of bone meeting industrial steel. The machine didn't stop. It didn't even slow down. It simply consumed him. Alex fell back onto the platform, scrambling away from the edge, retching. He curled into a ball, covering his ears, but he couldn't block out the sound of the gears continuing their relentless, indifferent rotation. Subtraction complete. The voice boomed, sounding almost bored. The load is lightened. Efficiency increased by 33%. The I-beam bridge stabilized. The lever on the control panel slammed down automatically, engaging the lock. The path to the other side was cleared. Alex lay there for a long time, staring at the empty space where his friend had been. Lucas was dead. He had died thinking Alex was the villain. Slowly, painfully, Alex stood up. He walked to the edge and looked down one last time. There was nothing left but the black oil and the turning steel. I'm going to kill you, Alex whispered to the air, to the walls, to the architect. I'm going to find the heart of this house, and I'm going to tear it out. He turned and walked onto the narrow beam, crossing the abyss alone. He didn't look back. The architect was right about one thing. The weak parts had been stripped away. Alex was no longer a student. He was a survivor, and he had nothing left to lose. But Lucas's final words echoed in his mind, louder than the machinery. Don't trust her. The metal bridge led Alex away from the roar of the machine room and into a corridor of oppressive silence. The walls here were lined with acoustic foam, absorbing the sound of his footsteps, making him feel like a ghost haunting a recording studio. The air was filtered, cool, and carried a faint, sterile scent of ozone, the smell of high-voltage electronics. Alex moved with mechanical determination. The grief for Lucas was a cold stone in his stomach, heavy and sharp, but he compartmentalized it. He pushed it down into the dark corners of his mind where he kept the guilt about Sarah and the fear of the freezing room. Right now, he needed to be purely analytical. He needed to be an architect inspecting a faulty structure. The corridor ended at a massive, circular door, reminiscent of a bank vault. In the center was a wheel. Alex gripped it. It was cold. He spun it, the mechanism moving with surprising smoothness, oil slicked and silent. With a heavy thunk, the bolts retracted. He pushed the door open and stepped into the heart. It was a master control room, a cathedral of surveillance. The walls were covered in banks of monitors, dozens of them, flickering with black and white feeds. Alex saw the empty freezer, the blood-stained pedestal in the antechamber, the dark void of the maze, and the churning gears of the junction where Lucas's life had ended. But he wasn't alone. Alex. The voice was small, trembling. Mia was huddled in the corner of the room, wrapped in a blanket that looked like it had been scavenged from an emergency kit. Her face was smeared with grime and tears, her dress torn. She looked like the sole survivor of a shipwreck. Mia. Alex rushed to her, falling to his knees. The relief was overwhelming, momentarily washing away Lucas's final warning. You're alive, I thought. The blast door. I crawled through the vents, she sobbed, clinging to him. I heard Lucas screaming. Where is he? Alex. Where is Lucas? Alex stiffened. He pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes. They were red-rimmed, wide with panic. He didn't make it. The bridge. He fell. Mia let out a strangled cry and buried her face in her hands. Oh God, no, 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 no. Alex watched her, a flicker of doubt igniting in his mind. Don't trust her, Lucas had said. He looked at Mia's hands. They were dirty? Yes, but unharmed. She had crawled through galvanized steel vents for hundreds of meters, yet her palms were not scraped. Her fingernails were not broken. He pushed the thought away. Paranoia. The house was trying to make him turn on her, just like it had turned Lucas on him. We have to end this, Alex said, standing up and pulling her with him. Where is he? Where is the host? Nia pointed a shaking finger toward the center of the room. There, facing away from them, was a high-backed leather executive chair. It sat in front of the main console, a sprawling dashboard of buttons, sliders, and levers that controlled the entire facility. The figure in the chair was motionless. I tried to talk to him, Mia whispered, hiding behind Alex's shoulder. He won't answer. I think he's waiting for you. Alex walked forward, his steps slow and deliberate. He looked around for weapons. There were none. The room was clean. Professor Vance, Alex called out. I know it's you. I saw your signature on the blueprints. No response. The chair remained still. Your experiment is over, Alex said, his voice gaining strength. Lucas is dead. We know about the plagiarism. We know about the assault. You have your data. Now let us go. Still silence. Alex reached the chair. He took a deep breath, clenched his fists, and spun it around. He recoiled, stumbling back, a gasp escaping his throat. It was Professor Vance, or what was left of him. The man in the chair was a corpse, and not a fresh one. He was mummified, his skin dried to the consistency of parchment, stretched tight over his skull. His eye sockets were empty, dark hollows staring eternally at the monitors. He was dressed in a rotting tweed suit, a mock king on a throne of dust. He's dead, Alex breathed. He's been dead for months. What? Mia peered around him, horror etched on her face. But, the voice, the commands. Who has been talking to us? Alex leaned in closer to the console. Next to the corpse's withered hand was a keyboard. On the screen, a program was running. Autopilot. Day 214. Narrative protocol. Active. Voice synthesis. Online. It's a recording. Alex realized the absurdity of it hitting him. It's all automated. An algorithm. Vance built this place, programmed the scenarios, recorded the lines, and then he sat down in this chair and died. Maybe a heart attack. Maybe suicide. He looked at the dusty microphone stand in front of the skull. We've been tortured by a ghost, Alex whispered. Lucas died for a machine's loop. He began frantically typing on the keyboard, trying to override the system. I can shut it down. I can open the main exits. The codes must be here. Access denied. Biometric scan required. Damn it. Alex slammed his fist on the desk. It needs a fingerprint. Vance's fingerprint. He looked at the corpse's hands. They were shriveled, the fingertips hardened and useless for scanning. It won't work, Alex said, despair rising. We're trapped in a dead man's grave. Alex, Mia said softly. Her voice had changed. The tremble was gone. Look at the desk. Alex looked down. Amidst the dust and papers, there was a single, clean object, a leather-bound notebook. It didn't have a layer of dust on it like everything else. It looked place. Alex picked it up. He opened it. The handwriting inside was frantic, scribbled in bold black ink. But, as he turned the pages, the handwriting changed. It became neater, more precise. The first few pages were Vance's notes on structural psychology, but the last entry wasn't dated months ago. It was dated yesterday. Entry 104. The subjects are responding well to the thermal stress. Subject Alex shows leadership qualities, but hides deep insecurity. Subject L. Lucas is volatile. Subject M. Mia is promising. Alex froze. Promising. He turned the page. Entry 105. Subject L eliminated. The friction served its purpose. Now, only the architect and the muse remain. The finale requires a choice. Alex dropped the notebook. He looked at the corpse. Then he looked at the room again. Wait. If Vance had been dead for months, who typed the entry yesterday? Who dusted the notebook? And why was there a fresh cup of coffee, still steaming slightly, sitting on a small side table in the shadows behind the monitor bank? The realization hit Alex like a blast of freezing air. The logic of the architecture snapped into place. The missing time in the timeline, the layout of the vents, The impossible luck of Mia's survival. Don't trust her. Alex turned around slowly. Mia was standing 10 feet away. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was standing straight, her posture relaxed, almost casual. The tears were gone. Her face was a mask of calm, eerie indifference. In her hand, she held a small remote control. You didn't crawl through the vents, did you, Mia? Alex asked, his voice barely a whisper. Mia tilted her head, a small, sad smile playing on her lips. It's dirty in there, Alex, and you know how I hate tight spaces. You knew. I needed a thesis project, Mia said, shrugging as if discussing a term paper. Vance had the hardware, but he lacked the vision. He died 3 weeks after I found him here. Poor old man. He built a cage, but forgot to bring the key. I just optimized the software. You killed Lucas. Lucas killed himself. I just gave him the knife, she corrected gently. And you, Alex, you were wonderful. The way you solved the scale puzzle. Brilliance. Truly. She pressed a button on the remote. The heavy vault door behind Alex slammed shut, the bolts engaging with a deafening clang. But every story needs a climax, Mia said, walking toward the dead professor's console, and I'm afraid the script calls for a tragedy. The revelation hung in the air, heavier than the stale oxygen of the underground bunker. Mia stood by the console, the remote in her hand, her silhouette framed by the wall of monitors, displaying the empty, torture-filled rooms. She didn't look like a student anymore. In the harsh blue light of the screens, her features seemed sharper, her posture rigid with a terrifying, clinical authority. Why? Alex asked. The word was a dry croak. His mind was struggling to reconcile the image of the girl he had protected in the freezer with the woman who now held their lives in her palm, because the data doesn't lie. Alex, people do. Mia walked fingers across the dusty desk, avoiding the corpse of Professor Vance as if he were merely a piece of furniture. Vance's thesis was flawed. He believed architecture controlled behavior. I believe architecture merely reveals it. I needed a control group, a leader, a brute, and an observer. She tapped her chest lightly. I observed. I recorded. And the results are fascinating. Lucas broke immediately. His physical strength was his weakness. Once his body failed, his morality evaporated. But you ... She looked at him with a gaze that was almost affectionate. You are the anomaly. You held the group together. You sacrificed your warmth, your safety, even your friend, though you didn't mean to, all for the sake of the structure. You are the perfect martyr. You're insane, Alex said, taking a step forward. This isn't science. It's murder. Semantics? Mia dismissed. She turned back to the keyboard. Her fingers flew across the keys, bypassing the biometric lock with a backdoor code she had clearly programmed herself weeks ago. On the main screen, a large countdown timer appeared in bold red digits. 5 hours, 0 minutes, and 0 seconds. The house is compromised, Mia explained calmly. The evidence is messy. Lucas's body in the gears, the blood in the hall. It's all very hard to explain to the local police. So, I'm initiating the purge protocol. Vance installed mining charges in the foundation pillars to destroy the facility if his illegal research was ever discovered. I'm just accelerating the timeline. A deep, subterranean rumble shook the floor. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The monitors flickered as the power grid began to destabilize. 5 minutes, Alex. The mountain will swallow this place. The concrete will crumble. The earth will fill the voids, and we will be nothing but a geological anomaly. Turn it off. Alex lunged. He was fast, but he was injured. The slash across his chest from Lucas's knife burned, and his muscles were fatigued from the climb. Mia didn't fight him physically. She simply sidestepped and pulled a drawer open. She lifted a heavy, black revolver, Vance's service weapon. She leveled it at Alex's chest. Her hand didn't shake. Sit down, Alex. Alex froze. The rumble grew louder. A crack appeared in the glass of the main monitor, spider webbing across the screen. There is one way out, Mia said, gesturing with the gun toward the back of the room. A section of the wall hissed and slid open, revealing a small, cylindrical escape pod. It was a pneumatic tube system, designed for emergency evacuation of high-value assets. It was tight, barely large enough for a single person. The capsule, Mia said. It shoots directly to the surface, 3 miles away from the blast zone. But here is the dilemma. The launch sequence must be engaged manually from this console. The person in the pod survives. The person at the console becomes part of the architecture. Alex looked at the pod, then at the gun, then at the countdown. 3:45. You want me to launch you? Alex realized. That's your game. You force me to be the murderer. No, Mia smiled, a cold, thin expression. I want to see if you are consistent. I want to see if the hero holds up until the very end. She tossed the gun. It clattered across the metal floor, spinning to a stop at Alex's feet. Alex stared at it. He looked up at Mia. She stood with her arms spread, defenseless, waiting. Shoot me, Alex, she challenged softly. Shoot me, get in the pod, and live. Prove that you are just an animal like Lucas. Prove that survival is the only instinct that matters. Alex picked up the gun. The weight of it was immense. He aimed it at her. All the pain, the betrayal, the image of Lucas falling, it all screamed at him to pull the trigger. She was a monster. She deserved to die in the tomb she had built. But then he looked at her eyes. She wasn't afraid. She was excited. She wanted him to shoot. It would validate her worldview that everyone is selfish in the end. 0:30. The ceiling groaned. A chunk of concrete the size of a microwave crashed down onto the drafting table, smashing it to splinters. I am not like you. Alex lowered the gun. He rushed at her, not to kill, but to grab. He seized her arm, his grip bruising. Get in the pod. He roared over the sound of the collapsing building. What? Mia's composure cracked for the first time. She looked genuinely confused. Alex, you'll die. You know I did this. You know I'm the villain. I know. Alex dragged her toward the open cylinder. But if I kill you, or let you die, I become you. I am not an architect of death. He shoved her into the capsule. She stumbled back into the padded seat, looking up at him with wide, baffled eyes. She had calculated every variable, every trap, every reaction. But she hadn't calculated radical altruism. She hadn't calculated that someone would choose to save their tormentor simply because it was the right thing to do. You're an idiot, she whispered, her voice trembling, perhaps the first real emotion she had shown all night. You're a fool, Alex. Maybe, Alex said. He slammed the pod door shut. He turned and sprinted back to the console. The floor tilted violently beneath him. 0:45. He found the launch sequence. Authorize launch. Y. He hit Y with a pneumatic whoosh that shook the room. The pod fired. Alex watched through the reinforced glass of the tube as the cylinder rocketed upward into the dark shaft, carrying the girl who had ruined his life away to safety. He was alone. The silence returned for a brief second, quickly replaced by the roar of the structural failure. The monitors exploded in a shower of sparks. The corpse of Professor Vance toppled from the chair, sliding across the floor. Alex sat down in the executive chair. He was tired. So incredibly tired. He looked at the countdown. 0:10. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the cigar cutter, the first key. He spun it in his fingers. He thought about the blueprints. He thought about the impossible geometry. In the end, Vance was right about one thing. The structure always wins. But Alex had won too. He hadn't broken. He had remained human in an inhuman place. 0:03. Checkmate. Alex whispered to the empty room. The ceiling gave way. The mountain descended, and the architecture of sin collapsed into dust, burying its secrets forever. The escape pod breached the surface of the earth with the violence of a mortar shell. It tore through a layer of permafrost and topsoil, shattering a grove of young pine trees before skidding to a halt in a pristine, snow-covered clearing. Steam hissed from the superheated metal hull, melting the snow around it into a circle of black slush. For a moment, there was absolute silence, the profound, heavy silence of the Canadian wilderness at dawn. The birds had stopped singing. The wind held its breath. Then, the pneumatic seals disengaged with a sharp crack. The hatch hissed open, pushing aside a drift of snow. Mia emerged. She didn't scramble out with the desperation of a victim. She moved with the fluid grace of a predator leaving its den. She stepped onto the frozen ground, her bare feet sinking into the snow. But she didn't flinch. After the basement, this cold felt different. It felt like freedom. She stood tall, inhaling the sharp, pine-scented air. Behind her, deep beneath the granite roots of the mountain, a dull, muffled thud resonated through the solace of her feet. It was a low-frequency vibration, like a heartbeat stopping. The charges had detonated. The architecture of sin, the concrete maze, the gears, the corpse of Professor Vance, and Alex had all just been crushed into a single, indistinguishable strata of rock and steel. Alex was gone. The boy who had solved every puzzle, who had carried the weight of the group, who had held a gun to her chest and chosen mercy. Was now just physics. He was matter compressed by gravity. Mia closed her eyes and let out a long, slow breath. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Hypothesis confirmed. She whispered to the trees. Altruism is a terminal condition. She looked down at herself. Her dress was torn, her skin smeared with grease and dust. It was perfect, but not perfect enough. She reached down and grabbed a handful of sharp gravel from the crater the pot had made. Without hesitation, she raked the stones across her left cheek, drawing 3 jagged lines of blood. She rubbed dirt into the wound. She messed up her hair, pulling it into a frantic tangle. She needed to be the survivor. She needed to be the tragedy. In the distance, the sound of sirens began to wail, a rising and falling chorus of mechanical concern. The authorities. Vance's dead man's switch had likely alerted them the moment the facility went offline, or perhaps the seismic activity had registered. Mia walked toward the logging road, adopting a limp she didn't need. By the time the first Royal Canadian Mounted Police cruiser drifted around the bend, lights flashing blue and red against the gray morning sky, she was ready. She collapsed into the snowbank, right in the headlight's beam. Doors slammed. Boots crunched on the gravel. Voices shouted commands. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Strong hands grabbed her shoulders. A warm jacket was draped over her. Mia looked up, letting her eyes widen, filling them with tears she could summon on command. "They're dead," she screamed, her voice breaking into a hysterical sob. "Everyone is dead. The house. It just ate them. It's okay. You're safe now," the officer said, his face pale as he looked at her injuries. "We have an ambulance coming." "What happened? Who did this?" "The professor," Mia stammered, burying her face in the officer's chest, hiding her dry eyes. "Professor Vance. He went crazy. He locked us in. Alex. Alex tried to save me. He stayed behind to open the door. He's still down there. You have to help him. We'll get a team." The officer lied soothingly. They both knew that the cloud of dust rising from the collapse a mile away meant there was nothing left to save. An hour later, Mia sat on the rear bumper of an ambulance. She was wrapped in a shock blanket, clutching a paper cup of hot cocoa. The chaos around her was organized firefighters, police, a search and rescue coordination team. They were treating her like porcelain, the sole survivor of a massacre. "Miss." A paramedic approached gently. "We found this in your pocket when we checked your vitals. You might want to call your family." He handed her a smartphone. Her smartphone. Mia took it with a trembling hand. "Thank you," she whispered. She waited until the paramedic turned away to speak to a police sergeant. Then, her demeanor shifted. The trembling stopped instantly. Her posture straightened. She unlocked the phone. It had 12% battery left. Enough. She opened the file manager. She navigated to a hidden folder labeled Thesis Project. Audio_assets . Inside were dozens of audio files. .01_intro_speech. .wavo to _freezer _instructions. .wavo3 Lucas taunt. .wavo for final choice. .wav. She tapped the first file. She held the phone to her ear, the volume low. "Welcome to the basement of your sins. The voice was deep, distorted, mechanical, the voice of the host, the voice of the monster. But underneath the digital modulation, the cadence was unmistakable. It was her own voice, pitch shifted, slowed down, stripped of humanity, but hers. She had recorded the script months ago in her dorm room. While Alex studied for exams and Lucas was at practice, she looked at the waveform on the screen. It was beautiful, a symphony of manipulation. She pressed select all. Her thumb hovered over the trash icon. She looked up. Across the clearing, the dust from the collapsed mountain was settling, coating the evergreen trees in a layer of gray powder. It looked like a graveyard. Alex had believed in structure. He believed that if you built things correctly, they would stand. He didn't understand that the most enduring structures are the lies we tell. He died a hero in his own mind, but in hers, he was just the final variable in an equation that had balanced perfectly. Goodbye, Alex, she thought. You were my best work. She pressed delete. Files deleted. Trash emptied. No recoverable data found. Mia locked the phone and slid it into her pocket. She took a sip of the cocoa. It was sweet, warm, and comforting. Miss. The police sergeant approached her, notebook in hand. We're ready to take your statement now. Can you tell us exactly what happened down there? Mia looked up at him. She let a single, perfect tear roll down her blooded cheek. I'll tell you everything, she said softly. I just hope you can handle the truth. And then, she began to tell the story. She had written for them, a story where she was the victim. Vance was the villain, and the only evidence to the contrary was buried under 3 million tons of Canadian rock.